Hey guys, and welcome to the walking garden tour here at our homestead. My name is Melissa K. Norris, and I am thrilled to invite you into my garden. And I thought it would be really fun to walk you through so that you can see all of the different areas where we have our herbs growing for both culinary and medicinal purposes, as well as our fruit orchard and our berry patch, and of course, the vegetable garden. Here we raise about 60 to 50% of our own fruits and vegetables, and we raise 100% of our own meat, but I'll save the livestock for another video. So right now, with where we're at, and at the time of this recording, we're just barely almost summertime. We've got like one more week according to the calendar. So things are still small, but they're really starting to grow, and we're starting to get a little bit of a harvest, especially from the herbs and some of the earlier crops. So I thought I would show it to you when things are still small, and then I'll do another one when we reach major full-on harvest and production mode later in the summer. So come on, I'm gonna take you through the homestead. So here we have right outside our side door, which is actually the door that we use to enter the house the most because it's at our driveway. But this is my first little container herb garden, and I like it because it's just right outside the door, so I can easily come out and harvest my sage and both my varieties of mint. So whenever I'm cooking or just want to make some herbal tea during the spring and summer months, it's a quick and easy harvest. So this is one of my favorite areas of the house. This is right outside our back deck, and I've got some of the flowers in here are just because I think they're absolutely gorgeous, but I do have a few food ones in here too. So I've got my lavender, which personally I don't actually like the flavor of lavender, so this isn't one of my food herbs, but it's a great medicinal herb and it's just gorgeous. So I've got a patch of lavender here, and then food-wise, I have got my thyme growing right through here. So that's a quick and easy one to come out and grab when we're cooking. And then I have oregano gone wild. So just know, wherever you want to put oregano, if you don't have it planted yet and you're going to put it in, which I highly recommend you put it in, it has gorgeous blossoms. This is getting ready to blossom, so the great pollinator factor, the bees love it. But as you can see, it goes a little bit crazy. It was just a little tiny plant when I put it in here 10 years ago, and it's just spread and went crazy. So I can quickly come out here and grab from my oregano forest whenever I need oregano when we're cooking. So this area is just more for fun and visual appeal than it is anything else. So we just have an old ladder here, and I've got some just flowers for prettiness. If you're noticing, I'm really focusing on incorporating beauty as well as functionality, because for so long in all of our gardening, I was really focused on just the food production, and I realized you can have beauty and food, and it's a really good idea to do both together. So this is one of those areas where it's for pretty factor, but it also serves a purpose. So of course I've got some geraniums and some petunias up here just for fun, but then I also have my basil, which I've been harvesting this little basil plant pretty heavily right now. So he's looking a little bit small. I need to give him a rest and produce some more. So I've got a couple different pots of basil, and then down here I've got a pot of cilantro, and then this is just some fun snapdragons that are just getting ready to bloom. So this is just takes advantage of getting the really nice mid-afternoon and late day sunshine, and I've just got some of my little potted herbs through here. So this is another one of my flower and herb gardens, and it's right at the end of our patio area. So we have a place for bonfires, and I do some Dutch oven cooking out here, just a place to gather in the summer months when it's nice out. And so I wanted to have a place of beauty at the end. And then I also have some different herbs in here for functionality as well. So this is one of my really big most established lavender plants, and it's just beginning to form some buds. They haven't quite opened yet, but even just the greens like this, I wish you could smell it because it smells amazing. So I've got two lavender plants. This one's a little bit smaller, tucked here in the corner. So I've got my lavender over here, and then I've also got echinacea. So this is a new echinacea that I just planted. I have a love of echinacea because not only is it medicinal, but it's really pretty. And this is a rainbow variety that I cannot wait until it blooms so I can see what it looks like. But I've also got just your standard purple coneflower echinacea here as well. And I've got, just a little baby flower. The very first one is beginning to blossom out there, and I've got a lot more blossoms getting ready to come. And this guy will bloom all summer long, even into those first frosts. And of course, I use this for harvesting mainly for teas, for some immune boosting teas is what I use the Echinacea for. And in this area, that's the majority of everything I have over here as far as like a medicinal plant. But I've also got right over here on this side, I've got some new elderberries. So these are just a year-old plants, so they haven't flowered this year, so I won't get a harvest off of them this year, but I will next year. So once they hit that 2 to 3 year mark is when you'll start to get some blossoms and then some fruit forming and being able to harvest. And these guys I wanted to plant a little bit further back and not close in, because even though they're small right now, these are going to really bush out and get to be a lot larger. So I wanted to make sure that I had plenty of space for them to grow without crowding out the other flowers. And then I also wanted to make sure that I didn't have them too close to the fence, because cattle are kind of notorious, at least ours are. If I have some of the plants that are too close to the fence, they would nibble on them, especially in the springtime when they had young leaves, and they pruned them, and a couple of them they killed where I didn't really want their help. So I was making sure that I had this far enough away from the fence that they wouldn't reach over and bother them. But these will also grow up and provide a little bit of shade during the summertime. So now I'll walk and I'll show you. We have quite a bit actually around our patio. So this is just our back patio, and here is my summer cooking kitchen and also our smoker. So we do a lot of summer activities out here. But this is our grape arbor. So this is, of course, I've got grapes coming up on both sides, and in probably about 2 to 3 weeks, the grapes will actually be all the way up and over top, and so it creates a complete shade canopy, which is really awesome during the hot summer months. And then I've got little itty bitty grapes that are already forming all through here. So then when they're ready to harvest, which is, I try to let them go through the first frost so that they are a lot more sweet. So about mid-September, the grapes will be ready, and I'll have grapes all the way up. Usually I don't have too much from the top with the way that we keep them pruned. The main part of the grape production is just on the vertical part of the slats here, so I can reach in and harvest them from the ground without having to go overhead or get on a ladder. But I will have grapes on both sides for the plants that we'll be harvesting here. And then if we continue towards the house, so this is our southern exposure and the back part of our house, that's our sliding back door that comes out. I've also got my little container here, another container garden, and this has rosemary in it, which is quite sprawling. I need to do a little bit of pruning work on it. I've got more lavender. Can you tell I love lavender? I think I have it in pretty much every flower area. And then I've got chives, and I also have quite a bit of basil hiding back here in the corner. I need to prune down this rosemary so this basil can get a little bit more sunshine. And so this is just one of my container herb gardens. But the great thing about having the rosemary in here specifically is when I tried to grow rosemary out in the regular vegetable garden, it would never make it through the winter. It would die. I couldn't get it to winter over and come back, so I was having to put rosemary in again every year, which I really like perennials so that I don't have to keep putting them in. And by moving it to this pot where it gets more of the southern exposure, it gets more heat, and it's more protected during the winter months, I've been able to keep this same rosemary plant alive. I think I'm going on like year 7, and it just winters over and it flourishes really good here. I just have to keep pruning it back, obviously, because it's in a container. Let's go and see, we'll go see the fruit, and then I'll take you to the vegetable garden. So here, I've got a brand new row of raspberry plants, and I'll make sure, and we will link below to the video on how to actually plant your raspberries if you're looking to put in some raspberries. And so I've got quite a few plants here, and these are in their first year. So half of them are the ever-bearing, so I should get a fall crop. I won't get a spring crop off of these, obviously, because they're too new and in their infancy. But this, just as having this one single row of raspberries, this will provide us with a year's worth of raspberries for a family of 4. I did have my raspberry plants, only have 1 remaining in this row over here. So this guy, of course, I'm going to be getting quite a bit of fruit off of here. They're still green. I've still got a few blossoms, and they're just getting ready to ripen up. But the reason I know that a row that long of raspberries will give us enough for a year's supply for our family of 4 is because I did have a full row of the same length here. But unfortunately, I think that they got root rot The soil wasn't as well draining right here as it is over there. So just to be on the safe side, as I was replacing the plants, we went ahead and put them in a new bed. This was the only plant of the whole row that was still really vigorous and not showing any signs of disease or dropping in fruit production. So we went ahead and kept this one here. And then behind it, I amended the soil and we took out all of the raspberry canes, and it is now my new asparagus patch. So I've got brand new baby asparagus through here. And of course, we're just letting them fern out because the first year with asparagus, unfortunately, you don't want to harvest it. You want to let them fern out and go back and feed the crowns so that they produce for you for years upon years and upon years. So no harvesting of them yet. And they're just our baby asparagus bed. Then, just a few feet over, this is my blueberry and rhubarb section. So both blueberries and rhubarb like acidic soil. So I like to plant them together because then I only have to amend the soil at one place because they both like acidic soil. So I can use the same type of shavings if I need to add any sulfur. I can do all of that, and they're both really happy with having that be more acidic. So we have 4 established blueberry plants. These are they're going on, I think, about 9 years now. So I've got some different varieties. These are smaller, more compact varieties. So the berries on them are smaller. They tend to be a little bit sweeter though, and they're pretty prolific. These are our bigger bushes, as obviously you can tell, they're bigger in height. And the berries themselves are larger too. And so you'll just get those bigger ones. So I like to have the little blueberries, I think are fabulous to use in muffins and in baked goods. But then I like to have these really big ones when I'm doing up my jams and pies and that type of thing. So we've got those and this amount of blueberries. So just having these 4 really good producing plants here, this provides us with enough blueberries, and this lasts us again all the way through the year. So I'm never having to buy blueberries from the store, and I can can them up and freeze them. And then I've got one little itty bitty tiny blueberry plant here. This is just a baby. And so this is the first year that I've actually let it blossom and have a couple of plants. We had to move the pole back here when it was little and we were mowing the lawn because this is just part of our lawn. It had a little bit of a run-in with the lawnmower, let's say. So even though it looks like it's really small, this is actually about a 4-year-old plant. And that's the reason I know it has a good root system that I went ahead and let it blossom out and have a few berries on it this year. Let's go, and I'm going to walk you to where we have our mini fruit orchard, and then we will end back in the vegetable garden. So here we have the beginning of our mini orchard, and these are all semi-dwarf trees. I went with semi-dwarf because one, it actually allows me to put more trees in the same amount of spot, and then pruning wise, it's going to have a lot to do with the size that you let your trees grow to, right? But I also wanted the semi-dwarf because I wanted to be able to harvest without having a whole bunch of ladders. My parents have standard fruit trees, and their fruit trees now are going on, oh my goodness, like 50 to 60 years plus at the house they're at. And they're a lot harder to manage and to keep pruned and to keep in really good health and actually get all of the fruit that they're producing. So that's why I went with the semi-dwarf. So here I have got an apple tree, and there's lots of little baby apples that we have forming here. They're all green, but there's quite a few in there. In fact, I need to go through as I'm looking and remove some of them. So if you thin some of them where you have a whole lot, then the ones that are left remaining will be a lot larger. So I can see I need to thin that when I had too many in one spot. And so here is my Gravenstein apple tree, which is probably hard to tell at this point, but it's one of my favorite old-fashioned apples. And it is, it looks pretty good and established, but this was when we had to move. Initially, we had it planted where it was getting too much shade. So it's a little bit stunted in its fruit production, and so I should get a good crop on it next year. Here I have got a cherry tree, and this is the one that the deers like to nibble on. You can see that I have a T-post here, but I didn't get up any protective netting or fencing, and they've already came in and nibbled this one, all the leaves off of it, and they started on this one, and thankfully they didn't eat. They left me 2 cherries. How kind of generous of them, right? So I've got a few cherries there. This is our mason bee house, which I see actually, unfortunately with the mason bee house, we have a ton of trouble with wasps, and I see that I have got some wasps that are trying to build a nest in there. So I'm going to come out later when it's cool and the wasps are less active and make sure that I get them out of there. So here we have got a plum tree, And then I have another plum tree right next to it. So this is a white flowering crabapple, and this is my pollinator for all of the different apples that we have. I have Chehalis, I have Gala, we've got the Gravenstein, and I have a Honeycrisp. So this guy, even though the crabapples are pretty tiny, produces the white blossoms during the entire bloom time of all the other apple trees that we have. So it's a great pollinator to have. And then I've got down here, this is actually my Honeycrisp apple tree, and this guy I just put in, I think 2 or 3 years ago. So this one is still fairly young. Oh, right here we go. So I'll be getting my first apple harvest off of this one this year, so I'm super excited about that. And even though the deer don't bother our vegetable garden, they really like the fruit trees. And lastly, I've got a young cherry tree down here, and so that is all of the fruit trees and the fruit that we have growing here on the homestead. Well, I take that back. We have a ton of wild blackberries, but we don't cultivate them, and they actually are classified as a noxious weed here where we live because they will just take over everything. So anytime we walk along the brush line or the fence line, we have just blackberries that are free roaming and are great to harvest, but we don't actually cultivate them. Let's go to the vegetable garden. Okay, so this is the annual vegetable garden. And we've had the same garden spot going on 13 years now since we've been here. And you can see that we've had it fenced. We just keep up the same fence. And even though the deer can technically jump over this fence because it's only about, close to 4 feet, they don't. So they bother the fruit trees, but they leave my vegetable garden alone. So we haven't had to do higher fencing or anything like that, which has been a real blessing. But it does help to keep just the neighborhood animals out, the chickens out when they're free ranging, because they will tear up a vegetable garden. And then in the event that the cows or the pigs are to get out, it also just helps to keep them out too. So we always keep ours fenced, and it's always, we practice crop rotation. But we always have this size of vegetable garden and these crops. So I'll walk you through. Over here I've actually got some cardboard where we are working and we're testing on doing a mulching method. So I'm mulching with cardboard and then wood chips on top of it, half the vegetable garden this year. I know what my soil levels are prior to doing it, so I'm going to be really interested to see after a full year and then testing this area of the garden versus the other area, how it changes the soil health, if it does, how I like it with weed control, ease of putting in different crops and all of that. So I'm kind of doing a year-long scientific experiment. So of course I will let you know the updates on that when we get them. So these will be going probably for about another month and a half, and then as we get really hot into summer, they will stop producing and I'll put something else in here. So here I have 4 rows of our onion plants, and these probably another 4 to 6 weeks before they're totally ready to harvest. But the great thing is when I pull these up, I'll still have time and space to put in some fall crops that will follow them. So I love it when I've got crops like that where I can use the space within one season to plant more. And then here I have got 2 hills, so 6 plants of our sugar pie pumpkins, which are some of my favorite pumpkins to grow. And then this is kind of, this entire area right here is our squash area, I should say our winter squash area, and some of the zucchini. So I've got a couple of hills here. That's the way we always planted when I was little, and I continue that. And then I have about 3 plants that are close together, and then they vine out in every other direction from there. So these are the spaghetti squash. I've got zucchini here and here. And then down here, I've got my butternut squash. And I think I have 1 acorn squash planted amongst the butternut. And a little bit of mixing up of some of the starts there, but I do know that it's all squash. And then here we come to our garlic, and we do the soft net garlic. And this garlic, I can tell by looking at the ends of the leaves that this will probably be ready to pull and beginning to harvest in about 3 to 4 weeks. So again, this will be an area in the garden that I'll be able to put in fall crops and use this space to grow something else throughout the summer months. So I try to really be strategic and thinking on the planning when we're putting in crops and what I can put right back in that spot within our frame window of growing things, because usually our first hard frost can come anywhere from middle of September to the first part of October if we're having a really warm Indian type summer. And then I have got some Brussels sprouts going on, along with my companion plants of nasturtium and dill, calendula, and marigold. And we love Brussels sprouts, so I've got quite a few rows, and I'm going to show you where I've got more Brussels sprouts going too, taking advantage of some different areas. But this is the main Brussels sprout patch. Then over here, I've got a couple of hills of my pickling cucumbers, and I've really got it dialed down to what I have left in the pantry from last year's crops and what we go through in a year. I still have quite a bit of relishes and pickles left, so I'm only doing 6 cucumber plants, and a lot of that I'll end up doing as fermented pickles because that tends to be our favorite, and just a few jars of actual canned pickles because we have so much left. So the crops that I put in are in a constant rotation, and they change in the volume of what we do every year based on what we have left from the previous year. So then I've got more calendula, because it's just one of my favorite. It's so pretty. It's such a great medicinal herb, as well as a companion plant and a pollinator. Then we've got more marigold, and then I've got dill and kale and nasturtiums. Kale chips are one of my kids' favorites, and I like to use kale and make like lasagna, and instead of using noodles, kale actually is really good. So we use kale in lots of different ways. Here is one of our first green bean trellises. And if you're curious about how to construct one of those and why I love it so much and we grow our pole beans on that, I have a video walking you through that, completely constructing one. And so I'll make sure in the video description below to link that so that you can find it. And I'm also using a little bit, as these beans grow up, they will create inside a shade canopy. So I'm testing planting some of my lettuce inside actually the trellis system in here, because the beans will help provide shade for that, to see if it fares better as we move into those hotter summer months. I've got some carrots here, and these actually overwintered from last year. So that means I'm gonna get some lovely carrot blossoms. You can see those already coming on, but it also means that I'm gonna be able to seed save from these. So even though I'm letting a good majority of these go to seed so that I can harvest the carrot seed, underneath the carrots are a little bit smaller, but that's fine because those smaller carrots I'm going to be using for when I'm making broth, as well as different soups and that type of thing. So I don't mind that they're not quite as, pretty and as large as I would be if I was just eating them regularly or chopping them up. Oh, roasted candied carrots is one of my favorite things ever. But these are a little bit more to put into your soups and your stocks and that type of thing. Oh, and we have a little ladybug who is in there. I always like to see those good insects in the garden. So she's hanging out within the carrots as well. And then I have over here, we've got some Swiss chard that is growing, and I planted that as well here. This is going to be a trellis system for some of our October beans, which are a shelled bean. So you grow them, they're going to vine up here, and then you actually shell them out, and it's the bean inside the pod, not a green bean. And so I put the Swiss chard on this side because, as you can see, my sun is coming from this direction, in the hopes that it will provide a good amount of shade, so that those vegetables that like a little bit cooler temps, that by the time we hit the really hot part of summer, I'll be able to take advantage of the shade that's produced by this row here of the pole beans. And if we come over here, I have got some radishes that I should have picked probably a couple of weeks ago. So they have actually went to flower, but that's okay. I will end up pulling them up, and if they're too woody, then the chickens absolutely love them, and the compost pile benefits too. But I need to make sure that I'm a little bit better on my harvest schedule. And then we have got beets. So I've got quite a few beets that are going through here. And then I have some radishes here that I was better at harvesting. But even these guys, like, look at this, you guys. This is one of the French breakfast radishes. And they are so prolific. I just planted these just 20 days ago, and this is how big it is already. So I'll be going through and harvesting the last of these, and then I'll be sowing some more so I can have some continual sowing and growing of the beets and radishes, and probably a few more carrots as well. And here I've got new lettuce that's seeded, and I found that for us, usually about 4 or 5 plants of lettuce is what will provide us and keep us going without it going to seed or having too much. So I do about every 3 weeks, I'll sow just another small spot of lettuce, and then that keeps us within lettuce for the pretty much the whole summer without having a huge amount that goes to waste or starts to bolt or goes to seed or whatever. And it just seems manageable and then keeps the rest of the garden space free for other crops. So through here, I've got our pepper plants. So I have quite a few bell peppers. I love red bell peppers. So I did King of the North bell peppers, and then I've got a yellow banana pepper and some jalapeno peppers as well. Now I'm going to take you to the greenhouse and show you the tomatoes and the peppers that we have in there. So here is my off-grid greenhouse, which I've got a video walking you through our high tunnel. It's a high tunnel. There's no heat, so it's not really a greenhouse because it's not heated, but I show you how we construct it. So if you want more information about that, then you can find the link to that video below in the description. But this is where we grow all of our tomato plants and some of our pepper plants. And then I'm taking advantage because of the way the sun comes through on our property. As you can see, this part is shaded by the peak of the greenhouse going this way. So this ground down here stays in the shade for a good portion of the day. So we actually just seeded a couple of weeks ago, and they're just starting to sprout and come up, some Brussels sprouts. As I said, we're kind of fanatical about Brussels sprouts. We love roasted Brussels sprouts. So we're growing extra of that crop this year. And so I decided to just remove some of the lawn and turned over some of the sod and put some compost down here and just extended the greenhouse basically, and using the shade to grow some of the cooler weather crops. So this is Brussels sprouts. And then inside, I've got all of my tomatoes and my lettuce. And here we've got all of the tomato plants. And then I have a few pepper plants going on the other side there. And then my lettuce, that was lettuce that's been growing in here through the winter months actually. So this lettuce I winter sowed, and this started in February when we still had feet upon feet of snow. We had about 3 feet of snow. And so the lettuce has grown in here. And now that we've reached June, of course, when it's colder out, it slows its growth down, which is really good. So I was able to have fresh lettuce pretty much all winter and into spring. But now that it's started to heat up, this has reached maturity. You can see that it's going to seed. So if I want to seed save from this, I can, because this one was the only lettuce that I had growing. So it's not had a chance to cross-pollinate with anything else. So I can seed save this, and then I'm going to pull it out, and this will go either in the it'll actually go to the chickens. They love to get the lettuce. So it's a little bit bitter to eat now because it's so big. Some of the smaller leaves up top work, but it's pretty much reached the end. So I'm just kind of waiting for this to blossom out so I can gather some of the seeds to save them, and then I'll be yanking it out and feeding that to the chickens. And then I'll wait until we start to cool back down again this winter, and then I'll use this space again in the winter months to grow some of those cooler weather crops so that we can have food production all year. Okay guys, well I had to come back over here because it was getting a little bit hot. We're hitting the midday sun there. So we came back to the shade of the Grape Arbor. And I just wanted to thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this garden tour of our homestead. And let me know in the comments below if there's anything that you would like more information about or that you would like to see. And let me know if you are growing a garden and some of the different plants and foods that you're producing for your family. If you enjoyed this, make sure that you hit subscribe so you get notified every time we have a new video. So thanks so much and happy gardening.